Hey guys, Scott Bryson Performance. Super excited about the changes we've made to the rear of our Predator for this next race. We're racing in about 2 days, so we've been working on the car for the last couple of months to just get these changes done. This is the brand new differential that we're going to be using on all of our Predator Pro versions. So the Predator Pro is just a little bit of a bigger version of the Predator that we generated a couple of years ago. It's the same wheelbase, same size, but we're running bigger drivetrain and bigger bits and pieces to cater for the new engine rules. So in Australia we can run 7-litre engines now, and in the US some of my customers and in Greece etc, they're putting 454, 500 cubic inch engines in these little buggies that were designed for a much smaller engine. So big change. Let's have a bit of a look at the differential. So you'll see up front that you can actually see that we now have the pivot points for the A-arms and the track rods all built directly into the diff housing. So the billet case allows you to have the pivot points directly bolted into the case. Makes a very small package. The wheels are out here, and the front of the car and the back of the car are right up inside the wheelbase. So you can nosedive the car without the front of the car smacking into the ground. You can see how short the rear and the front of the car is. This front end or this rear end is exactly the same as the front and the rear. The front has a steering rack and the back has the tie rods tied off to there. So really awesome product. Looking forward to giving this thing a bit of a run on the track this weekend at Bencabbin. Like all of the Performance differentials that we're making for nearly 15 years now, the ultra narrow diffs have the CV joints right up inside the centre of the diff, and out near the axle here we have the CV joints right up near the wheel studs. So the CV joints on the inside of the hub, and at the differential it's right up on the inside of the diff, which gives us a much longer axle and much more wheel travel. Obviously with the CV tucked right up inside the diff and the other CV right up near the wheel studs gives us an incredibly long axle. So we're nearly 1 metre long in the axles, which is about 3 feet in American terms. 3 feet of axle. The CV in our differentials, a bit different to what most people are running. It's a 40-degree CV, so we can run massive angles. We've chosen only to run 30 degrees on our angle on the CV joints to reduce the stress on them. Most side-by-side guys are running 40+ degrees to get every inch of wheel travel they can. Running 30 degrees with these really long axles gives us 33 inches of ground clearance and 30 inches of wheel travel. So we've still got 3 inches of ground clearance at full compression, which is enough to stop the bottom of the car striking the ground, unlike a lot of side-by-sides who have a lot more wheel travel than they have ground clearance. A little bit more about the diff. Why did we move to this particular differential? So for the last 15-20 years I've been running Dana gears, 30s, 44s, 60s, Dana 80s, a few different versions. We're finding them really hard to get genuine gears, and we've actually purchased a lot of genuine gears only to find out that they're copies and counterfeits, etc. So we've moved away from the older stuff from the 1990s, the 2000s and mid-2000s. The new gears we're running now are a Dana metric gear. They're the M220s and the M200s, etc. There's different versions, but the new metric set of Dana gears is a much more efficient gear set, much stronger than what they've made before. The pinions are massively stronger, the bearings are bigger, the pinion shafts are bigger. Everything about the new Dana gears is much higher improved to what they were 5-10 years ago. These diff gears were running in from the 2021 to 2023 Jeep JL Wranglers, so very modern and high tech. And one thing we've noticed is that Dana has changed the high port offset, which is the distance between the pinion and the centre of the diff. They've brought the high port closer to the centre of the diff, which makes them much more efficient. So most guys will check horsepower at the wheels when they do a horsepower check on a dyno, and they lose a lot of power through differentials and transfer case, etc. The new Dana differentials are so much more efficient. You're going to see a massive increase in power at the wheel because of the high port offset that we've chosen to use. So there's a few reasons we've done it. High port offset, bigger gears, more availability, less Chinese counterfeits, etc. One of the other things is having that high port offset closer to the centre of the gear. It allows a much lower operating temperature. When you throw that high port offset really low, like the old 9-inches used to have back in the 60s, they generate a ton of heat. They generate a lot of power loss, so the power through the diff is very poor. We're going to see a much lower operating temperature. We can start to run smaller oil coolers, less oil volume, and have the things running much cooler and a much more efficient drive to the wheels. Now, something we're doing on the Predator Pro diffs, the bigger versions, is we're trying to move away from electric oil pumps. We've been running these for 15 years. And right up in the new pinion housing here, we're going to be creating a G-rotor pump. And the G-rotor pump is very similar to what you find in a camshaft of an LS engine or something like that. The oil pump will suck oil out of the front of the diff, up through the coolers, back through the return, and there'll be a small feed to the pinion bearings. You'll see our little pinion line here where it feeds the pinion bearings on the prototype here. We're still running an electric pump on the prototype here just so we can simplify all of our testing on the weekend. We don't want to be testing too many things in one hit. So this particular diff has a scavenge out the diff, up through a filter, up to the cooler, back from the cooler into the main line with a metering point going to the front of the pinions. Right up in the pinion housing we have a little metering valve that we've actually engineered. We can change the flow of the oil into the pinion bearings. Really critical that we get oil into the pinion bearings of any motorsport diff, and we see a lot of diffs on the market that have no feed to the pinion bearings. The internal bearing, when it's spinning at high speed, prevents oil getting into the external bearing, which is the one right up near the yoke. We feed oil into these pinion bearings to actually keep them lubricated. We have a metering valve, like I said. We can actually take that metering valve out like a Holly jet in a carburetor, unscrew it. We can put a different metering valve in the front of the pinion here to change the oil flow going to the pinion bearings. And inside the pinion bearing housing, we have a little level control system, some little ports built in. When the level rises to a certain point, the oil will flow back into the main case. Bearing manufacturers in their engineering books will tell you the maximum submergence level of a bearing. If you over submerge a bearing in too much oil, they generate a massive amount of heat and the whole diff will just get incredibly hot. We learnt that nearly 12 years ago now by submerging the bearings completely in oil, and it generated a ton of heat. So a lot of engineering into keep these things lubricated but not getting hot. In case you're not aware of what we were just talking about, the back of the vehicle, this is the front of the Predator. It looks almost identical to the rear. In actual fact, every corner of the Predator buggy is exactly symmetrical. So the front left, the front right, the rear left, the rear right are exactly symmetrical, and the front and the rear of the car are exactly symmetrical. The new Predator Pros will have the same diff front and rear, but this arm can be flipped from this side to here and vice versa, front, back, left and right. The arms, the CVs, the brakes, the hubs, the steering rod, everything, and including the shocks, front, rear, left, back, it's exactly symmetrical. So really, really awesome for reducing your spare parts and keeping your inventory down. Again, being symmetrical, these sway bars fit both the front and the rear. So one sway bar is the same all the way around the vehicle. We have ball bearing pivot points for the sway bar, so no plastic bushes or anything to flog out. There's actually ball bearings built into the pivot point. And the stress point of the sway bar is actually one of our axles. So if we pan back with a camera, you'll see the axle down here in the suspension. This axle here is the same thing we've used for the sway bar up here. So one thing, you're carrying a spare axle while you're driving around. If you ever need to, you just pull it out of the sway bar, swap it into the car and get yourself going. If you're at Dakar or you're doing a race for thousands of miles and you've got a broken down car, it's really easy to just pull an axle off of here and put it onto here without having to carry them. And it's also another thing that we don't need to manufacture. So having the same axle all the way around the car and then having the same axle front and rear on the sway bar, it keeps our manufacturing costs down, simplifies the design and keeps the cost of our kits down. But the Predator, again, in case you haven't seen it, we manufacture all these components in-house. We make the rack and pinion, we manufacture the hubs, we make the diffs, we make the transfer case, and all of the kit is the part that you guys make. So we give you all the sheet metal and all the tubes pre-bent and laser cut, and you guys just weld it all together, bolt in the rack, the diffs and the hubs, and you get yourself a four-wheel drive V8 buggy or a trophy truck, whatever body you want to run on the car. So guys, really excited about the new differential, the new changes we've made, the new front sway bar. So we've now got a rear sway bar, front sway bar. We're going racing in 24 hours. We're heading off to the next event and looking forward to see how the car performs. So wish us all the best, and any more information, just jump on our website and you can find out more about the Predator. Thanks guys.